Well, we are in Sao Paulo, chilly 12 degrees, Sao Paulo, which in Boston would be an amazing hot day. I haven't recorded a video in a while, but I'm here to tell you something. Happy birthday, America. And reflecting upon my own story, I moved to the US to study because I realized that I needed to learn something new. So I went for um, winter vacation, or really, our summer vacation. And then right afterwards, I spent like a month in Boston. And then I went to Europe for a month and a half, just backpacking. One thing you, a US citizen, should realize, and I've talked about this before, America is not a country, it's an idea. And I'm very happy that a lot of people are going to the World Cup, which, by the way, Brazil is out, sad, but I'm glad that there was some unity here in Brazil. But back to the birthday of this great nation that taught us so much about a different form of government. And I share some of the concerns of a lot of Americans that there has been, I mean, what I saw in the past. So I moved to the US in 96, and, I moved out and back and forth for quite some time. I do business in the US. I consider the US my second home, and I'd love to go back and live a little bit. We're doing a project for Latin America, so Miami might be a very strategic place to Brazil and all other Latin American countries. But the point is, when I first moved, we were not in this area of wokeness. So the patriotism, the holding the flag was something that for me as a Brazilian who never really experienced that sense of community, and we did only during Senna's race. And I can tell a little bit about that. But it was a moment that everyone was united on that little flag that he used to carry after he won the races. So the World Cup was also a moment where we were all united. Not as much in recent years, but I actually felt this year in São Paulo that people were not at the same level I used to remember, but they were cheering for the nation, for the team. And last this Monday, is today is Wednesday, which happens to be a holiday. Sorry, Thursday is a holiday here in São Paulo. That's why very low traffic. I'm at work because it's only in the state of São Paulo, but it's the revolution of 32, where São Paulo was trying to rebel against the dictatorship of Vargas. But that into the idea of a nation, it's important. And I like Brazilians to be more united. I like Americans to be more united. I have a sense that it started around 2000 because I had been a few years in the US and I was right in college when Gore lost the election. And for me, at least for me, I would pinpoint at that moment. The wound of 2001, September 11, united again the nation. But now, the entire world, we're looking at the same situation, and we have very different interpretations of reality. So I was happy to see people commemorating the 4th of July. I remember going to the Esplanade in Boston to watch the fireworks. And I believe Brazil and the US have a lot in common, and we need to learn from each other. And Brazil needs that patriotism that most Americans really have. I've been most of the time in Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C., in fact. when you travel, and I was fortunate to travel, uh, America, like the interior is very much like Brazil. We're very alike. It saddens me the rift between the countries, and I believe that will need to be sorted out. Brazil needs to make things simpler. We're doing business here, so obviously we want to cheer for Brazil and also other Latin American countries. But to most Americans, what I don't understand, and you need to correct me if you don't grasp this, the US was founded upon an idea of freedom. You know, the reason I had this sense, I was in law school in Brazil, uh, young, I was 19, I guess, and I dropped out of law school to move to Boston because I was studying English for like a month, and then I was gonna go to Europe just to. I was just sightseeing. I was just like a vacation. I wasn't really happy with what I was doing, and the economic situation of Brazil always ups and downs. So we're used to this. My father passed away in 1990, so our our economic situation downhill. That's why I'm an economist. Don't hold that against me. But my first lesson in macroeconomics was around 15 and moving forward. Right now, we are discussing in Brazil a lot of tax reform, labor reforms, and it's always trying to help and being paternalistic. It always hurts the economy. And I felt that firsthand. My family felt that, and our purchasing power was disappearing. Everything my father um, accumulated through hard work, it was disappearing. And so in 94, actually, so it was literally 18. Yeah, I sat down as I'm here with you on Harvard Yard, and I had done the Freedom Trail, learn about the Tea Party, the revolution. Obviously, I've heard that in school, but another thing is walking through the streets. I went through the same path. I mean, not the full path of Paul Revere, the whole thing by by land or sea, and now going through all that historical locations. Those men, and I know some of you in America call them racist, call them patriarchs. They put their lives on the line for freedom. The US population came from England, fleeing persecution, famine, and in some cases of the Irish, for example. A lot of Irish in Boston loved the St. Patrick's uh, called celebrations. But then these men, they were rich. Like here is the financial center of Latin America. Those men are not putting their lives on the line for the improvement of their country. Quite the opposite. I think the worst part of the Brazil is our elite who doesn't walk up to the plate and the people suffer. But thinking about a message of union, think of this. Those men, right, sat down and they thought about a different form of government because they didn't want to pay taxes to the king of England. And that is the idea of America, a city upon the hill, this ideal that we all should achieve. So I've talked about in the past, and my idea is really US, America is an idea. Israel is an idea, is a promise given by God. And Brazil is kind of this, my point of view, is this third component. Because just recently I went to my to a kids party. My daughter, her friend in the building. It was a nice party. And she's Russian. And her father's Russian. They live here, they do business in Brazil, live here for a while. And there were a couple that I actually thought they were Russians too, because speaking Russians and I see them in the building. They're Ukrainians and they're really good friends. And I've seen this before. And I know there's a war going on. There's an animosity. There's some. They're part of the same culture as well. But I've seen this with Arabs and Jews in São Paulo. It's kind of this aura. That's why I want us in Brazil go back to that um, easy going, you know, that we had in the past, and we're still divided a lot. But a friend of mine from MIT, when came to Brazil, we came from like I think it was spring vacation, just for like a week or two, come back to Boston. So left cold day. I think maybe it was a winter vacation. Forgot. Anyway, we came to Brazil and we went to this house of another friend. There's in the lake, and he it was Turkish and he was Muslim. I mean, I think he's still Muslim. But back in Boston, he wouldn't drink or eat pork. First day, we were sitting on my friend's country home, and we had just flown from Boston, arrived in Sao Paulo, drove an hour or two to get to the place, and all of a sudden, we're in this beautiful table, and we're having a barbecue, we're talking, eating, drinking, and the funny thing, when I realized my friend, I'm not going to mention his name just for privacy reasons, but he was drinking a caipirinha, which is alcohol drink, and eating pork, torresmo. Um, and for me, that image, it's really about Brazil. We're able to bring people together. Lately, not so much. My dream, personal dream, would be to have Lula and Bolsonaro working as a team. Will that happen? Well, one thing you need to learn about Brazilians, we are always hopeful that things can happen. And I admire what's happening in America. I see a future where we're all going to be proud of the idea of America. I mean, that can be expanded. So for Europe and Asia, we should all work together, not necessarily as enemies or even adversaries economically, but work together. And the 4th of July, 250 years of the birth of an idea that's not finalized. And to you, Americans, you are born with great privilege, but not in a negative sense. You should be proud. You know, one thing I've always felt about coming home from vacation and then going back to school, and it's very weird. I hope that changes. And a lot of Brazilians feel the same. By the time I would arrive in Brazil, going back home, right? See my family, spend some couple weeks of vacation. From the moment I stepped foot on the soil of Brazil, I was treated as a criminal. Really? Are you bringing anything? I mean, technically, I was residing outside, so my computer, my phone, and things like that, I didn't have to pay taxes. But it was always like at work. And, I spend minutes, hours. I've once almost lost my connection in São Paulo because they treat you as a smuggler, and I don't like that. Honestly, I never felt welcome coming home. By the same token, going back to school, and sometimes it was New York, sometimes it was fly directly to Boston, different airports. The well, it was already at some point it was TSA before 2001 was I don't know what was it called, the Border Patrol. They were welcoming him back. Well, good luck in school, welcome back, and I that always felt weird to me that on another nation I was welcome. Nobody was trying to charge me for a gift that I was bringing a friend or my own computer. And that's something that I wish Brazil and I want Brazil to change to make Brazilians feel welcome when they come back or when they're going out. So the unit and the World Cup and the US, I not big of a soccer fan, but obviously for Brazil I cheer. But the thing about air conditioning, the Europeans are saying by far I work with technology and innovation. I believe that after the wheel, air conditioning is the best invention ever, ever. I personally don't like to be hot. I hated when I was growing up that you needed to pay extra to have air conditioning in your car, and it was a lot of money. I'm glad that now you have a lot of place air conditioning. It's more accessible. But honestly, the Europeans, when I travel to Europe, doesn't have air conditioning everywhere or heating for that matter. One of the most hot that I felt in my life and cold was in Europe. But that's the thing. There's a lot of lessons. And by the way, one of the presidents, I forgot his name, he was shot. And either one of the names of the air conditioner is a carrier or the other one. They implemented this innovation at the White House. It was very fun. Now we have it. But that's the point for all the, if any, American citizens besides my friends. Listen to this. You have privilege. You have a lot of men and women that fought before that. But to those men in 1776, who some were killed, by the way, and they signed the Declaration of Independence, that was also a signature of their own demise if they lost the revolution. And if you know your American history, they almost did. So that was a struggle to form a nation. And I don't think Brazil needs to go through a struggle because we have a different story, but we need to go to a moment of unity. And that is what the US went through with all the, back and forth. But that's the point. The reason I moved to the US to go to school is because I knew I needed to learn something that I wouldn't find in Brazil. Investors in Brazil, they want everything perfect. They want to come into a company when everything is perfect. US, and I'm doing this right now, you talk to an investor, they understand the future, they know the risk, and they believe you. Um, but that is, in essence, something very beautiful that you trust in innovation. So in 1963, a US president, Kennedy, looked at the moon and said, by the end of the decade, we're going to be there. And you were. I know they killed him and his brother. That's something. The story of America is not like a straight line. You, as American citizens, you need to fight for truth, for for the ideal that American is created upon. Yes, America is by definition a Christian nation. Everybody that was there on the Declaration or even on the different states, you needed to confess or to be Christian. And why is that important? And why we lost this? Because if you have a law that you need to follow that is based on principle, um, we saw in the recent years that courts can be packed, judges can have weird decisions that are not even based on law. So we need to stop and look back. I don't see the events that transpire since 2020, 21, the taking away the liberties, the pandemic, don't go home, don't get it out of the house, all those crazy things that we now know not good, not based on facts. Use mask, don't use mask. The personal, the personal liberty will most likely be fought in America. Obviously, we now have cameras everywhere. Privacy is non-existent. I don't think there's a way back, honestly. And the Bible, it says there will be a point that there will be no secrets. So everybody knows each other's secrets might be a different world. Because if you think about it, politically, the only reason you have intelligence agencies is because you want to get secrets from the other side. If everybody's an open book, maybe it will be a weird world, but let's see. But it says on the Bible. And that's the point. The World Cup, it's a chance for Americans to look at the reactions of other people. And to see that you need to be proud of your history. You know, I worked in DC at the OAS, Organization of American States, as an intern, and every time I was sad or I was pissed, I would go to Arlington Cemetery. Beautiful, beautiful JFK, just across the river. But looking at those white stones, I realize, and as a citizen, you need to criticize your country when they send your boys, our sons and daughters, to stupid wars. But those men and women, mostly men, they sacrifice everything. And I also, um, like to see the guard at the tomb or the eternal flame at JFK's memorial, because those men, the unknown men or the known men like RFK and JFK, they are part of this story. The general, who, by the way, they took away their farm, his farm to make it at a cemetery during the Civil War, or Lincoln, all of this. Those are beautiful stories. But at the end of the day, you are your hero. What I mean by that, Brazil lost a game, but it's just a game. It is a game, and it's part of the life of the players. But we have here tons, tons of champions. Doing business in Brazil is one of the most difficult things you ever gonna experience. You can do business, I'm sure, in the moon is gonna be easier. But the workers, the shopkeepers, we're all on an uphill battle. And so all of this, men, women, children, young, old, they're winners. And that's the point that maybe Brazil needs to think again. We're not losers because we lost the World Cup. We need to be unified. We need to be proud of the flag. We need to honor whoever is sitting on the president's desk. We should have definitely something totally different as far as all this confusion and criticism and calling names the opposition party. Same thing that's happening in the US. And honestly, like, I think Trump could maybe cure cancer. Someone will find a way of criticizing him. I worked for the Democratic Party. I worked at the Obama campaign, at the John Kerry's campaign. I actually worked directly with Robert Reich when he ran for governor. He was a professor at Brandeis. And I I don't recognize that party of Kennedy, or the party of Ted Kennedy as a senator from Massachusetts. My God, it's just like it's a nonstop, just venting and ranting about it. And don't get me started on the whole thing about some of the most radical, the Democratic Party. It's America needs to go through a process of revisiting the history. And the problem is, if you have informed citizens that understand, are proud of their country, well, there's a drawback. I mean, companies and not going to be able to manipulate with some ads and buy this, buy that, or say that outsourcing stuff in the 90s was always going to be good because prices go down, but your salary went down as well. Happy birthday, America. We hope to have a long standing. We hope to collaborate with you. We hope that Americans can be again proud of American, to be an American, and stop looking at the glass half empty. You have rule of law. You have beautiful about innovation. You had men and women, mostly men. Remember, this is 1776. Some were slave owners. Yes, that was the process now at the time. It's like saying, look, you have a phone. I mean, maybe in 200 years, we're going to say phones were bad for you. That's it. Everybody uses. but they were forward-looking enough to say those liberties that we are talking about, they're not given by a government, they're given by God. So all men are created equal. Yes, we need to improve, and we are far from being perfect as humans. We're not angels, or anything, but that's how we need to achieve. But yeah, your country did beautiful things, but they also killed Kennedy, killed Charlie Kirk, and I saw that video that went viral. Someone saying that he hated Charlie Kirk, but then he realized that he was hating himself because he was sold the propaganda. And the same thing about Bolsonaro or even Lula. In the end of the day, there might be a way of bringing a nation together, of bringing people together. And that's what we do. Depending on the project, we're just trying to make people's life easier. Technology is a beautiful thing. Everything is technology. Conversation, relationship, those are beautiful tools that we need to learn again to use. And well, we don't know who is going to win the World Cup. It's not going to be Brazil, maybe Argentina. Who knows? Our neighbors to the south, President Malay, and we all, and I mean, we all should stop really just criticizing the other side of the aisle, political, and stop seeing that, not only focus on the difference, but start looking at the positive things, what we have in common. And if I have one thing left to America, watch Senna. That guy was a killer racer. And you know what happened in Boston in 1700s? It's beautiful. You should all visit. You walk on those streets, and Philadelphia as well. And visit. You can sense those men that were afraid. They were not a trained army. They were fighting for something other than piece of land. And we may have lost a little bit of that, but you had great politicians. Yes, we all have. Can you believe? Can you look? Trust me. If you look at the world, we look at Churchill. We in Brazil currently we have Lula and Bolsonaro. Yes, they don't like each other, and most of the people that either like one side or the other. But those are amazing politicians. Trump, can you believe me? That guy is doing something that I don't think any president or king ever alive was able to do. So you should be proud. Maybe you don't agree with him, and not here discussing whether he's right or wrong. I'm just saying he is an amazing politician. He was able to win. They took them out, and he came back wiser, smarter, understanding the system, and he is going against the so-called deep state. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a negative thing because you have a bureaucracy that is supposed to get the state moving. Because if you were to change everything every 4 years, obviously wouldn't be positive. But at the same time, the founders, framers of the Constitution, never wanted the power to be on bureaucrats. That was the opposite. So from time to time, a country needs to revisit, to adjust, and that's fine. And I hope to see you for the next 1,000 years, America. I wish you the best. I also recommend Robin Williams, comedian, talk about the flag. When you see those stars and stripes flying high, remember why that's there. And if you don't believe in a war that was right, what was wrong, vote better, pick your leaders, and make sure to be a real citizens. One of the things we are obligated to go to vote. You guys are not. And from the people I grew up with and met in the US, very few. I mean, I met some politicians, so my view can be skewed. But I know the majority, because in the campaigns, everything is about getting people to vote, interested. And that's a design of the system, but it's part of that. Congratulations. Maybe the US will still win the World Cup. If so, that'll be very good. Soccer, great sport. And happy birthday, America.